Greetings, June Squad, and welcome newcomers. I am Jay, master of all things nerdy, and the tall drink of water on the other screen is Chris, stalwart companion, defender of the nerd faith, and Lord Commander of the Nerd's Watch. And just like the Constructicons, separately we may be weak, but together we form the mighty Just Us Nerds podcast, and we are proud to join with the Hanging With Web Show and HWWS Web TV for CyberCon 2020. As we make our digital streaming debut, we are happy to bring you, free of charge, our panel of power. Interviews with legends of the comic book world, as well as some rising stars.
We ask that you consider joining us. Show your support to the local Center for Disaster Philanthropy's COVID-19 Response Fund. Just click the link on CyberCon 2020's page and donate what you can. Every little bit is appreciated.
And also, why not support your local charities as they struggle to help communities with these challenging times? With the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, some families have been thrown into chaos as their incomes have virtually vanished overnight. The Second Harvest Food Bank has been the leading hunger relief network in the region since 1971. The Just Us Nerds podcast, as part of the 2020 CyberCon, want to invite you to be a real hero and join the fight against hunger. Visit our Facebook page for the link. Also, if you look at the crawler below, you'll see that we have the addresses for each of those organizations. One is a direct link to the Center for Disaster Philanthropy. The other is a link to our Facebook page where we have the GoFundMe link. With that said, let's jump right in with our panel of power with our first guest. What do you say, buddy?
Yeah, let's do this, my friend.
Finally, we're here. We are very good. We wanted to welcome him in proper style, but due to some technical difficulties, he has to join us, over audio. Let me do a brief intro because this, of course, really a brief intro does not do this man justice. This is Mr. Jim Fern. Jim Fern is an artist and has been a comic book artist for 38 years, working on many titles for both DC and Marvel. First becoming an artist for Marvel in 1983, working on various Spider-Man titles. His work as a fill-in artist includes titles such as Amazing Spider-Man, X-Men Annual number 13, which, by the way, was the first appearance of Jubiliee, which he had a hand in co-designing, co-creating, Transformers, and Wolverine. His work with DC Comics as an artist for over 40 years included titles such as Legion 90, Adventures of Superman, Batman, and Detective Comics. Jim was also the artist and co-creator of Crossing Midnight for Vertigo, a series produced in 2007 and 2008 with writer Mike Carey. In addition to his comic book work, Jim has worked as a Walt Disney World artist for the Disney Design Group. Jim was born on Long Island, New York, and now resides in sunny Florida. Please join me in welcoming back in his third appearance on the Just Us Nerds podcast, Mr. Jim Fern.
Yeah!
Hey guys, I think it's been 39 years now since trying to get myself on this Be Live app. That was like,
yeah.
Like the easiest part of my career was not trying to get on this.
Not trying to. This has been the most challenging part of your career.
Right. Where's the pencil? How do I get it? There's no eraser.
Yeah. It's technology is great, except for when it's not. Jim, I wanted to mention that just as if I can gush for a moment, one of your early fill-in jobs was on Marvel's Transformers 31 Car Wash, which the title was called Car Wash of Doom, which was one of the first comic books that I ever read. So interviewing you really kind of brings things full circle for me. So thank you for that.
You need therapy after that, because that's like one of my worst jobs. It was like, hey Jim, you want to do this? I'm like, yeah. And then I'm in the middle of it going, how do I do this? How do I keep these guys transformed? So I'm glad it was your first. I'm hoping it's a good memory, right?
It's a very good memory, Jim. It's a very good memory. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I can only imagine.
Got you into comics, right?
Well, the Transformers were my entry point into into comics. But I mean, speaking of entry points, we've talked about this before, so I'm sure it's a story that it's kind of you're used to telling. But you had sort of a unusual entry point into comics. If I understand correctly, at 17, your uncle happens to be an usher at the same church with Bill Retchen, who was he was the artist on the comic strip Out of Bounds and Croc. And then Bill introduces you to comic book artist Mike Roy, and that was sort of your entry point into comic books.
Yeah, it was actually. So how long do we have? Did I eat up all our time? Like 45 minutes?
Yeah, we're good.
Put up your finger if I take too long.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, so I was 15 years old when he introduced me to Bill Retchen. So my uncle and Bill Retchen ushered in the same church in Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., and I'm from New York. But I would visit my uncle every now and then. So this one summer, I went down and he introduced me to Bill Retchen. And I was like, and Bill Retchen his name was Retchen, like I reckon.
Yeah,
so Yeah, he did this strip called Croc, which in the 70s, I grew up in the 70s, was one of my all-time favorite comic strips in the newspaper. I just couldn't believe it. I was like dumbfounded, gobsmacked, So he said to me, my uncle was a pretty good artist himself, and he never got into cartooning. He wound up in World War II as a teenager. So that, the career as a veteran sidewinded his career to be a cartoonist. He wanted to be Milton Caniff, Terry and the Pirates and all that, Steve Canyon. So he lived vicariously through me as the cartoonist. So when he saw, as I got older, I got better at drawing, he showed my stuff to Bill Retchen. And Bill Retchen said when I met him, I said, I could get you a job right now as an assistant to Mike Roy. And I literally said to him, you mean I can make money drawing? You mean I can make money doing this? 15 years old, because all I did as a kid, it was just me and my mom. And my two sisters were out. My dad died when I was 3 years old.
Oh.
We needed money. Yeah, we needed money, right? I was mowing lawns, breaking leaves, shoveling snow, doing a paper route. I worked in a bakery as cleaning the floors. So when I heard I could make money drawing, I was like, hey, I said, that's a great, hook me up. And I was in high school. I was in 10th grade. And I'm thinking, I'm going to wait 2 years, to get out of high school to start working. And I slept-walked through my last 2 years of high school. But in the meantime, so I'm thinking, if Bill Retchen thinks I'm good enough to get a job right now, I'm going to throw in my portfolio to DC Comics. So I started doing all this stuff. I did the Justice League on the poster board. I didn't know anything, like what paper to use, what pens, pencils. I just did whatever I had. So I mailed off this package in the DC Comics, which they were pretty local. They were only like 56 miles away from where I lived. I mailed it in. The next day, I get a phone call from Ernie Colon up at DC Comics. My mom picks up the phone and goes, "Hey, Jimmy, it's DC Comics. You want to talk about, an explosion of, joy?"
Wow.
There you go.
Childhood fantasy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can't. The only other time I felt like that was when Archie Goodwin called me and said, "Hey, I got you a Batman fill-in to do," which was years later. Almost like 11 years later. But anyway, I was like, "What?" So he says, Ernie calls and says, "Yeah, I think your stuff is really good. We have a project going on, new talent showcase. When can you come in and meet me?" And I'm like, "How do I? I've never been to New York, So you tell me when." So I had to have. I'm 15 years old. I don't have a car or anything. I had to have my mom escort me. So we hopped on the train, and my mom waited in the lobby. This was at 75 Rockefeller Plaza. Have you ever watched David Letterman or whatever, the Late Show?
Yeah.
It was in that plaza there with that big golden thing on the ice rink.
Wow.
The famous building, the WABC building. I'm not sure. But anyway, so we went out. What's that?
No, I'm familiar. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So that's where they were when I went up, and my mom waited in the lobby, and I'm nervous, and I walk in. It was all official. I was waiting for fun, but it was very corporate. So Ernie comes out and he says hi to my mom, and he escorts me all the way back into the offices, which I had to. My heart was pounding. I'm surprised they even survived it. And we went back to this narrow office. There were like, I can't remember, like 4 desks. It was split. So the front 2 were 2 other people, and the back 2 was Ernie Cohn and Marv Wolfman. You know Marv Wolfman? Len Wein, Marv Wolfman. They created all those great, those great characters that I can't think of. Yeah. So they're going over, Frank Lone's going over my work, and he said, this is something else. And he looks over at Marv. I'm 15 going on 16. I'll be like 16 in a few months. And he said, how old are you? I said, 16. He goes, Marv, you're 16 years old. So that was my first step into waiting for the job that Bill Rickon said I could have. I was just like, I want it now. I was, like I said to you earlier when I was trying to get this thing going, my body might be slow, but my mind is always racing. I don't like to waste time. And it's been like that since I've been a teenager.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, I always feel like your origin story in comic books as a comic book artist is like every child's kind of fantasy. They just imagine as they're sitting there doodling that, one day I'm just going to get a call from DC Comics because they're gonna look at something I drew and they're gonna want to have me just come in and do a Batman book for them. But it actually happened to you. It's incredible.
That or the New York Yankees are going to call you because you play Little League.
Yeah, well, that was the other thing. I absolutely before this wanted to be a pitcher for the New York Mets. I was more of a Mets fan, Long Island, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tom Seaver was my hero. So before this came about, when I was in 5th grade and so on, I just wanted to be in baseball. I love baseball. So anyway, we'll go back to the comic book. So before I got that phone call and mailed that stuff in that Ernie saw, I wrote a letter to Dick Giordano. And the funny thing is, I went in to see Ernie Colon, Marv Wolfman. Marv Wolfman was looking at Superman pages he was editing, but I think Klaus Janson inked. I don't remember who the pencil was. And I was just like you were saying, I was just like, this is, as a kid, I used to dream that in my basement there was a secret panel with all baseball goods, the baseball bats, baseball gloves. This was like the next best thing. It was like an explosion of a treasure chest. And so anyway, I wrote to Dick Giordano before I got invited in by Ernie Colon, and I finally got a rejection letter from Dick Giordano 6 months later. And I felt like saying, hey, I was already in there. Sorry I had to wait 6 months for your rejection letter, but it was sort of like I got in before my rejection letter. It was weird, But what happened was Ernie Colon said, so you asked me about later on, what to say to new aspiring artists. They probably know a lot more than I did. Ernie Colon said to me, he said, he tutored me for like 3 months. I would go in and out for 3 months. And he said, do you know perspective? Do you know what perspective is? And I just looked at him, and he said, you don't know what perspective is. He said, let me show you. So he took all these large tracing papers and showed me perspective. So when you go from a kid doodling on your notebook,
it's amazing.
That transition from that to a continuity comic book artist is completely 2 different things.
Real trial by fire.
Wow.
Yeah.
So and then. So then, Jim, you go on now, and you work as a fill-in artist, and then you get to work on X-Men, and you actually get to do something that a lot of people don't get to do working in this field. Is you add a spoke to the wheel, so to speak. You co-designed the character of Jubilee for the X-Men, which has gone on to become an enduring character. I think. When people look at the X-Men 90s cartoon, I think Jubilee is one of the characters that people identify with that cartoon. So can you take us a little bit through the process of designing a new character when given that task?
Yeah. There are many facets to that, but I'll just jump ahead quickly. I recently emailed Jen Bartel. I love her work, and she's a big Jubilee fan, and she's done, I believe, covers with Jubilee. And I said, hey, I'm Jim. I did Jubiliee in her first story, blah, blah, blah. We had a nice little repartee there. And I was nowhere near where these young people are today, but I'm going to jump back again. So Bill Reckon was also good friends with Sal Buscema.
Mm-hmm.
And Sal lived they all lived in the same area. Mike Roy, Bill Reckon, Sal Buscema in Springfield, Virginia. Now, which I didn't know at the time, his brother John Buscema from Savage Sword of Conan lived closer to me in New York, which I wound up meeting him later on. I became friends with him. So when I came back, I left Virginia. I came back to New York. I had no work, and Bill said, I can hook you up with Sal. So I get in touch with Sal. I wrote Sal a letter, and I said, Sal, this is my work. Call me Collect if you ever want. So next thing you know, he calls me Collect. Sal Buscema was calling me Collect. I had no money. I just call Collect. So he said, yeah, I can open up the door for you up tomorrow. So he introduced me to Ralph Macchio. So this was 1983. Ralph Macchio was an editor, a writer, and so I did my first.
Was he the editor in chief, Jim? Was Ralph Macchio? Was he? Am I misremembering? But was he editor in chief?
He was editor at one point. I don't know if he filled in, but this was around the time Jim Shooter was there. But he was one of the bigger. He was one of the higher editors.
Now, this is not to be confused with Ralph Macchio from The Karate Kid.
The actor, yeah.
Ralph Macchio. I forgot who pronounces what, but I think it's Ralph Macchio, the editor.
It's good.
So I bounced around a lot, and the thing with Jubiliee is I got a script. I was just a fill-in guy, I was never like, hey, put you on a book. We can get into that some other time, but I thought I was going to be like a new Amazing Spider-Man artist, but Todd McFarlane wound up being chosen. I was like, Todd who? So anyway, I got this story. We were all like, Todd? Who was that? It was a fan game guy. So I get the story, and for some people, for some projects, it's just you can work with the writer if you're friendly with the writer. And I wasn't friendly with Chris Claremont, and I thought, wow, Chris Claremont script. But in the script, he just describes Jubiliee, what she looks like, and what her attitude is, and her costume. So he has specific costume in mind, and that's what I drew. And he did say, he said her home, like this makeshift home, because she's homeless, it's sort of like, the Lost Boys from Peter Pan. So I just, in my head, I'm thinking, well, okay, I'll make her sort of like Tinkerbell with that attitude.
Yeah, okay.
And it's pretty much exactly the way she was when I drew her, except for the costume. They added this, to me, it looked like Robin the Boy Wonder costume.
Yeah.
She has now, right? Yeah. But anyway, that was how it was with him. But with other cases, like with Mike Carey and stuff I'm doing now, you can get more involved with the genesis. There are a lot of cases like as a fill-in guy, and it just needs the story needs to be done. I just go with what the writer has.
Sure.
Right.
Well,
all right. So I got a follow-up question with that.
Sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, so I got a follow-up question that. So Jubilee's been around since 1989, has gone through some cosmetic changes, of course, through the different iterations and how it's gone. How much of your original design remains that that from when you've done it?
Well, I did it one other time in the issue of Wolverine. A horrible cover that John Romita Sr. designed, but I drew it horribly. It's pretty much the same, like I was saying, except for the costume.
Right.
The colors and everything, it's the same character.
That's awesome.
I know. I haven't read anything lately. I don't read much anymore. Last book I followed was in 1986. It was Greg Rucka and David Mazzucchelli and Batman. So that's how up to date I am.
Well, this is something interesting about you that I didn't know, and it was actually in preparation for this interview. you were always more drawn, if you'll pardon the pun, to comic strips rather than comic books. You emulated guys like John Reiner, who drew the Lockhorns, and recently we lost Mort Drucker, who drew some of the very best caricature art for Mad Magazine. Could you talk more about that?
Yeah, well, like I said, Bill Reckon, I was into the strips. You know, it all comes from childhood. I couldn't, you know, if I went out, I love my mom. She's a great person. But if I went out and bought comic books, she'd tear them up. But the things we would get was the Sunday newspaper.
Yeah.
And what was the first thing on the page was
comics.
So that's sort of what I safely got into. But I like it. I'm a simple person. I'm a simple-minded person. I'd rather do humor and simple cartoons rather than fighting and which I can do well. But you know, there's a different emotion when you do it. I'm more of a funny bone emotion. You know, I'd rather go for the childish tickle than you know, guns are blazing or whatever. You know, powers are blazing. Yeah. All that kind of stuff. So yeah, I had actually been asked by. If you're ever familiar with the Wizard Vid. So back in 1983, I wound up, you know, with Bill Reckon. I met Brant Parker, who was responsible for doing the Wizard Vid. They all look like the same strip, but they're all different people who did the strip. BC, right. Johnny Hart, Cross by the Wizard. Now, this is all old stuff. Hopefully there are some people out there, when they listen to this, they'll know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, it's maybe a snooze fest. But so,
no,
not at all.
People, Jim.
Good. So Brant Parker, Johnny, you know, BC, and Croc. I always thought they were all the same guy until I met Bill Reckon. I said, "Do you do the other?" No. I said, "You all this because it looks identical." Then I wound up not long after meeting Brant Parker with Milton Caniff through Bill Reckon. All of us were together, and with my uncle, Brant Parker asked me to be his protege on the Wizard of It. And I actually declined. I actually, while I was sitting next to Milton Caniff, and I actually declined because I couldn't see myself drawing the same thing over and over again every day, the same style. And that's one of my biggest regrets today. I'm like, why didn't I accept that? Why didn't I say yes to that? But because I have difficulty when I'm doing a story. If I start on page 1, the character looks different by page 22. Like I was on Legion 90 for 6 issues, filling in for I can't even think of his name now. British. He's my Facebook friend. I hope he doesn't hear this because I can't remember his name. Anyway,
we'll just bleep this part out, Jim.
Legion 90, like Garen Beck. I did Garen Beck. Is it Garen Beck? He had a weird, almost like logo hair. I did it shaped like a starfish because it was kind of like it. So by the end of my run, it went from like a close crop thing to like this big kite fan fanning over his head. And I met some guy at one of these local cartoonist things in New York. His name is Army something. He's a writer for sometimes Archie comics and stuff. He said, he said, Jim, weren't you on Legion 90? I said, yeah. He said, where Garen Beck's hair kept growing and growing and growing. Yeah, I can't keep it consistent, you know?
It was a superpower that he had. It was it was a power that hadn't been explored yet.
This was over time.
It was a cheap head.
It was a hair-raising experience that he had been through.
Right. That's the side effect of the powers. His hair grows whenever he fails.
Mind your business.
But I'm always trying to do better. So as I'm drawing, I'm trying to reshape it to the way I like it. I'm never happy, so things change.
I think that's always the mark of a great artist, is that you're always trying to improve, or really kind of the mark of a great artisan of any kind is that you're never completely satisfied. You always see room for improvement. Jim, you've had an amazing career. I just wonder, do you, and later on we're going to be interviewing another artist who's kind of up and coming. I wonder if you have any advice for any newer artists, or if you could go back in time and give yourself some advice about working in the comic book industry as an artist, what would that be?
Well, there's so many levels. Let me go back real quick. Mort Drucker, yeah. Mort Drucker, with my natural style is similar to Mort Drucker's. I always wanted to be Mort Drucker. I always wanted to draw for Mad Magazine. And I got the opportunity to meet him and hang out with him through the New York group of cartoonists with John Reiner, a few times. Last time was in 2012. And so new artists, and you can see a photo with me with him on my Facebook page photo. There's many things. One is, like I said, well, let me go with this.
Sure.
If you get into Marvel or DC Comics, it's a business.
Right.
When you're at home and you're doing and you draw for yourself, that's fun. But when you get in with them, it's a business. There's a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
It's a deadline pressure. And when I got in, it was, hey, nobody wants to touch this. We need it tomorrow. Can you do that? I mean, literally.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my first job with Ralph Macchio. And I said, yeah, I'll do it. I picked it up, drove home, and then I drove back in the next day with it. And then I got the next thing. Went home, came in the next day. And I kept getting work like that because I was the deadline hack kind of guy. So when you get it, you got two things going for you. You either handle the deadlines really well, or your art is so groundbreaking that you become the new fan favorite, whoever it is, whether it's a McFarlane type or whoever it's out today. Like I said, I like Fiona Staples, but like for a while there on the Green Lantern, Ethan Van Sciver.
Yeah,
I know for a fact he wasn't a favorite within house,
mm-hmm.
but they kept giving him work because he's a fan favorite.
Yeah,
and as far as I know, he was. So you can either be slow and methodical, but a fan favorite, and you always get work, or you can be adequate and fast and always get work.
Like a machine.
So, right. So it's two avenues there. The business is about deadlines and fan favorites, sales.
Jim, did you ever find that sort of grind, did it ever rob you of some of your joy of the artwork, of drawing?
Sort of. What robs you more is when you're working, you're dealing with many people, and there are many personalities. You got the colorist, the letterer, the writer, the editor, and then the editor-in-chief. And that can get really complicated sometimes. And that business aspect of it sort of robbed me of what I call the romance. So when I draw differently, than I do for a comic book because I know I have to get it done. Mm-hmm. And then after a while, I get like I said, I'm not happy with anything I did because it's not actually the way I envision myself doing comic books in the beginning. So, if you get a project with, like right now I'm working, I'm doing the adaptation of for Oliver Stone, his Showtime series called The Untold History of the United States.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I'm doing 91 pages of that, sadly, because the original artist died, Steve Stiles. So I've got 91 pages that I'm penciling, inking, and lettering, and I'm going to be doing tone on. And I have a pretty good deadline. I got a pretty good deadline on that.
Woo. You got your hands full.
That would be like the ideal thing you get in a business, but when you're in a month-to-month business like Marvel and DC, you don't get that. Mm-hmm. Maybe with a special project and you're a fan favorite. Yeah, so that's basically where it all lies now. And be prepared. If you like to be active and go for walks, be prepared to sit all day long. Mm-hmm. All day long. And no sleep, Wow. Because if you want to be good at what you do, you just cannot sleep. And I used to never sleep.
All right. Well, Jim, I can't overstate this enough that it has been such a genuine honor and pleasure to speak with you and get your perspective as a veteran in the industry. Where can people find you? So are there places where people can have fan engagement with you? Just
internet search my name and I pop up on Instagram, Facebook. I always answer emails where I can, so I'm not, I'm not inundated like most of my peers, like Jimmy Palmiotti and all those guys. They get tons and tons of, so I'm always available.
They're pals of yours, right? Amanda Connor and Jimmy Palmiotti?
Yeah, very good friends, Amanda Connor and Jimmy Palmiotti, yeah.
I hope you won't object to the term, and at the risk of offending you, I kind of, you're almost like the Forrest Gump of the kind of comic
100%.
Industry, in that you've kind of rubbed elbows, like literally, with just kind of other legends.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say before. I was never really a big name. Carl Moline, the pencil Carl Moline.
I'm not familiar with him.
Yeah, from CrossGen, Route 666. He did Buffy for a little while. But he's a penciler.
Okay.
Anyway, we met when I started a job at CrossGen, and he goes, wow. He goes, Jim Fern. He goes, you're a real person? So I thought you had one of those made-up names. Because in the old days, like when Marvel had a bunch of guys cramming together to do a deadline, instead of like us ranking out each other, we all had like a group name. Like Neil Adams' continuity had a group name called Krusty Punkers. It was just a bunch of people jamming together without credit,
Yeah.
So he thought I was like a Krusty Punkers. Jim Fern was a Krusty Punkers name. I said, no, it's the real guy. But yeah, because I was just a hack, rushing things out for deadline. And I never quite, got my own fanfare. But yeah, I was,
I wouldn't say that, sir. I definitely love some rounds.
No, Jim, I think one of your qualities that I've found in the time that I've known you is just an incredible modesty. You're an incredible artist, and you've really, whether you realize it or not, you've left your mark on the industry. Yes. And so we're humbled and honored to be able to have the chance to interview you.
Yeah, and and honestly, Jim, you've always been so good to us and so gracious. And honestly, I'm just very thankful that Jay and I can say that you are a great friend of this show.
That means more to me than artwork. But it's my art that got us together. So there's a plus to everything. I appreciate that. I'm glad I left the mark. I guess any mark is a good mark, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. Super. Well, this has been Jay and Chris, the Just Us Nerds podcast, talking with Jim Fern. You heard the man. Put a search in for his name, and that's where you could find him, co-creator of Jubilee and legend in the comic book industry. Jim, thank you so much for being with us. We definitely are going to have to catch up with you in the future, okay?
Next time we'll get this video working right.
You can count on it, buddy.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
All right, Jim. Take care.
So coming up, we'll be joined virtually by Miss Tana Ford to talk about her work on Marvel Silk, as well as her collaboration with award-winning author Nnedi Okorafor. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. If you're enjoying these interviews, don't forget to donate to the Center for Disaster Philanthropy. So the link for it, it's not a link, but if you look in the crawler right beneath my name, you see the address where you can go and donate, or you can donate on just go to our Facebook page. And if you want to donate to Second Harvest Food Bank, we have a link there for a GoFundMe page that we've started. So while we're waiting for Tana to kind of join us, she had popped in and she said she'd be back in a moment. Really, I think it has always been such a genuine pleasure every time that we talk with Jim. It's just such a great sort of, I love kind of revisiting yesteryear. It's with him. It's fantastic.
It's always nice, especially hearing from like his world and where, he's been and what he's gone through. And, like he's like, oh yeah, I just happened to walk into this, and I'm like, you've got
next to Steve Ditko while I was waiting in Marvel's lobby. No big deal.
I just look at him like, you did what? He's like, well, and he's so humble. He's always, like his work is fantastic. I have in my office here, I have a print of his that he did when he did the Aquaman run for DC in the 90s. And that was the first time that we met him. And I remember seeing the Aquaman and just losing it. I'm a giant Aquaman fan and saying, I'm like, oh my God. I was like, I grew up with your art. I've always loved it and everything like that.
Right.
And he signs it and he hands it to me and he just kind of smiles and he goes, it makes a difference. Like he's just always gracious and always been so good to us.
Warm guy, super warm guy. But we got to move on to our next guest, who is. Let me give her a proper intro before we bring her on stage. What do you say, Chris?
Yes, sir. Lead away.
Tana Ford is an artist and writer, best known for her 12-issue run on Marvel's Silk, starring Cindy Moon. Her first graphic novel, Duck. I'm sorry, I'm never going to stop doing that. I apologize, Tana. Her first graphic novel, Duck, won the Clear Press grant in 2010. The sequel, Duck, Second Chances, was a Lambda Literary Award finalist in 2014. Now, Tana came in second place for the 2019 Hugo Award for her work with Nnedi Okorafor's Black Panther, Long Live the King. She teamed up with Nnedi again on LaGuardia with Dark Horse Comics, where she got to work with legendary editor Karen Berger of the Berger Books imprint. Tana just finished a 4-issue run of Livewire written by the incredible Vita Ayala and edited by Heather Antos at Valiant Comics. Tana has drawn for Silk, Amazing Spider-Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, New Warriors, Gem and the Holograms, Star Trek, Black Panther, where she co-created a new character, and Livewire. I need to take a breath after saying all of those. She hails from Boston, which, if movies have taught me anything, means that she has, at some point in her life, taken part in a bank robbery, loved the Red Sox, and has crossed paths with Matt Damon.
Don't forget, love Sam Adams.
Hey, call your mother. She's a dog lover, and when she's not listening to the Just Us Nerds podcast, she enjoys watching The Witcher, playing D&D. Let us give a warm Just Us Nerds welcome to the very talented, the always entertaining Miss Tana Ford.
Yeah!
Hey!
This is so much better.
What an introduction. Holy moly.
You better just leave on that, because it can only go downhill from here.
Okay,
Yeah. That's amazing.
Like
Hi guys.
Around with the picture-in-picture. That's gonna totally screw us up there.
Nice. Look at this. Just
I feel like we're doing like
swapping us around. I love it. We're dancing. We're getting our dance on. This is all dancing can be now because we're not allowed to hang out in person.
Social distancing. So, Tana, you are making your triumphant return to the Just Us Nerds podcast. First and foremost, what have you been up to during this time? And actually, more importantly, why haven't you called? And have you been seeing other podcasts? And are we ready to call this thing exclusive yet?
Listen, I have been seeing other podcasts, but I'm just I'm sort of poly podcast, that's how I identify.
We get it. We understand.
You don't want to be tied down. I understand. It's cool.
I love you guys. So, so I'll always be a guest here. Oh, it's so good to see human faces. Look at you guys.
I'm here, like in the flesh, so to speak. It's fantastic.
At our safe distance.
Because, all right, if you want to see her, hear her previous interviews and everything like that, they're broadcasted on SoundCloud, also on iTunes, anywhere basically you can get interviews and podcasts and whatnot. You can actually go just type in Just Us Nerds podcast. They're gonna be right there.
Nice.
Absolutely.
That was so much fun too. You guys are great interviewers.
Oh,
you do a great job.
Awesome.
You do.
It's all. Hold on.
Ring hand. Thank you. So with how does an artist cope with quarantine?
Yeah.
Are you just drawing like crazy? Are you just on your couch with Netflix? Are you what goes on?
Yeah, so for me, my day-to-day hasn't changed terribly. I usually stay home alone with the dogs and draw all day anyway. But the world imploding is very distracting, right?
Yeah.
Like it affects every aspect. There was like I'm living for all of the coronavirus memes. It's like, it turns out my 3 favorite things to do were occasionally go out to eat, touch my face, and see 4 human people. Like, and I was like, oh my God, that's me.
Or
Pretty
going
much.
to a random place because, you're like, why not? I got to get out of the house.
Yep. And so from a work standpoint, it's been excellent because I've been able to do a ton of work sort of uninterrupted, without distractions, which for me can be, there are times where it's problematic as a sort of an introvert when I work and an extrovert when I'm at shows. Not having shows, not having a place to go, and conventions and interactions with fans has been really hard. And my partner works in a hospital, so my girlfriend is coming home every day. Yeah. And and is immediately throwing her clothes in the washer and jumping in the shower. We're disinfecting everything. Like, that's become part of our new normal.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. So that's a thing that exists that didn't exist before. So
Right.
from a work standpoint, I'm getting a ton done.
Well, I'm sure the bosses are happy about that.
I mean, I love working, right? Like, I get to create stories. I'm, the best storyteller I've ever been. I'm getting better all the time. I love doing this. I also have time to sort of do deep dives into media. Like, we're watching movies, we're streaming things on Netflix, we're talking to people online about fandoms and art and books that we love and sharing them with each other digitally. And the focus on the arts right now is really interesting and I think wonderful. So that's been a plus side in sort of the darkness that surrounds us all.
Yeah, and I was thinking about, as we just had a previous guest was Jim Fern, who artist for many years for Marvel and DC, and he was just talking about how if you like going out, don't be an artist because you just spend a lot of time indoors. And kind of mind this morbid thought of, well, the pandemic's kind of conducive to that, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And I caught some of that previous interview, and he had mentioned Klaus Janson, who is one of my perennial favorites. Klaus is such a wonderful man, and such a phenomenal, talented artist, a superior inker. So I just love that man. But anyway,
Dark Knight Returns, right? He worked with Frank Miller.
Yeah, he's actually working on some new Batman stuff too. I think he's doing a Dr. Freeze book through DC or something in the Murphyverse imprint. Anyway, but I love him. He's great. But now I've derailed my thought. So working on comics, like I'm sitting and working all the time, right? Like, if you're a writer of comics, you can say, sit at your computer and say the world blows up, and panel 1, close on the heroes, panel 2, they hug, panel 3, the universe explodes. That's going to take you 5 seconds to write, and that's going to take me 2 days to draw, right? Like, that's just the level of effort that it takes to tell a story visually is very high. Like, it just, even for the soft moments, the tender moments, that like stuff that takes your breath away in comics. Yeah. It's just, it takes so much effort. It takes so much care. I'd
say that I think it's the tender moments that probably would be a little bit more difficult, because it's those little nuances that you have to show. Otherwise you're like, I don't know if these people like each other.
Yes. And if you miss it, oh man, you can like, it's in like, the level of an eyelid, right? Sometimes are they scowling? Do they hate each other? Are they squinting with hate, or are they like softly looking at each other lovingly? These things are really hard to convey sometimes. And so I don't know, but I love it. And I feel really fortunate that I get to do it and that I get to try so many different things. I mean, I worked on Star Trek, which I love. I've been a fan of Star Trek forever. I got to create a lesbian Spock.
What? That's amazing.
Yeah, it was during the Infinite Diversity, Infinite Change. What's the C stand for? It's IDIC. It's like a famous sciencey thing, but whatever. Okay. I got to do a comic book through IDW, and they were doing like infinite diversity. So all this multiverse of like, they had a plant-based Kirk and a gas-based Scotty called Gas Scotty, which was hilarious. And I was like, well, we need some gay people up in here, right? Like, that's one of my, long time. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
If you can have a Planty Kirk, then you can have a gay character somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's
And
not that far off.
yeah,
So it stands for infinite diversity and infinite combinations.
combinations. Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep. And
There's my guy. There's my guy with the knowledge.
I love
That's what
it.
I do.
I love it. And so the way that IDW structured it is they did different artists, like an infinite diversity of different art styles. Each different issue had a different, it was wonderful. And they got really talented people to do it. It was helmed by Sarah Gatos when she was back with IDW. I think she's with Oni now, but it was so much fun. And so I got to create a lesbian Spock who in her universe is still with Uhura. And like, anyway, so like there are these small wins, you know, I'm one of the only artists that got to draw lesbians in a healthy lesbian relationship in the Marvel universe. Right?
What?
Like, so I get to do cool shit.
Right? That was in Silk?
It was in Silk, yeah. So my agenda is always women and queer people, right? Like that's and representation in comics. That's my whole deal. That's what, you know, that's what my whole brand is built about. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's my deal. And I got to do a lot of this stuff. Silk was one of the only female solo titles at Marvel. There were 5 at the time.
Right.
And until Ms. Marvel came along, and I think Ms. Marvel was the only other woman of color that had a solo series at the same time that Korean American Silk, Cindy Moon, had a solo series. The other 3 were white women. There was Spider-Gwen, Spider-Woman, and Mockingbird. They all had solo titles at the time. But in my book, we did female friendships that, you know, her part of the ethos of Spider-Man is that with great power comes great responsibility. And what happens without people there to temper you, to remind you of your humanity, to ground you. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we did the Spider-Woman crossover event with writer teams from 3 different big books, Jason Latour and Spider-Gwen, me and Robbie Thompson over at Silk, and Dennis Hopeless and his artist over at Spider-Woman. Were they writing They were writing Spider-Woman. And anyway, so we did this big crossover and it's been out for years. The bad guy is a Silk that never had that temperance, that never had those friendships, that humanity, that thing, right? And so you get to see the dark side, right? Like what happens if you don't talk about things. Yes. And so, and I think it puts in sharp contrast a hero that's able to, you know, talk to a therapist, talk to somebody about with great power comes great responsibility, to lean into her darkness, but not be consumed by it, and to have friendships. And at the end of it, we got to do a lesbian wedding with an on-screen kiss for an interracial lesbian couple that doesn't die. Like there's been a lot of cool shit that I've been able to make in the world. So
that's pretty awesome.
That's excellent. And I imagine as an artist of comic books, you're someone that enjoys them yourself. And so we want to see something of ourselves represented in these stories.
And it's something now that's going to last, you know, for eternity.
This will always exist. And I'm very excited. There's a new creative team coming out. They are relaunching Silk in the summer. I mean, if the book industry doesn't completely implode and, you know, the world doesn't end, which we don't know. But I'm very excited to see what a new fresh voice and a new look will do for this character that I am invested in deeply. And this fandom that I have found to be as open and loving and caring as any in all of comics. It's been a real treat to work on this stuff. And so I'm excited that she's back.
And it's funny that you mentioned, you know, about the comic book industry imploding, because I know that specter has definitely been raised a few times, and especially with the way that this particular crisis is affecting the industry. I'm going to keep fingers crossed that comic books.
They were just talking
in some form.
They were just talking, like AT&T was just talking, because apparently they own DC, and which I was like, wait, what? And they are looking and they're like, well, if this doesn't sell well, I guess we're just going to stop making comic books. And I lost it. Like I threw a fit.
Good. It's so short-sighted. I mean, so the movie industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and you've got the comic book, the book publishing, which they don't put any money in as it is already. All editors are overworked. There's an oversaturation in the market, but it's fandoms that more people in the universe care about now than have ever cared about in the history, just because of how huge these movies and the superhero movement is. It has touched more people's lives than just comic book fans, expanding it to all of these people. And what you have in comic book, boardrooms and at Marvel and DC and the big is an idea generating machine, right? Like this is the testing ground. If something works in the books, then they can translate it. They can use that material in the movies and expand the universe. I know, but
never do.
So I think to cut that out is just,
well, one of those ideas now that I've seen sort of rumblings on the internet, if that is to be believed, hey, it's on the internet, so it's got to be true, right?
That's right. That's how this works.
Abraham
that sort of reinvigorate excitement is for Marvel and DC to have another crossover. Have you seen any of this, Tana?
I have. I've heard. It's hard to know what to believe, but I think that would be very exciting. And with with Bendis over at DC now, at DC now, I think that there's, he's the Marvel man, and now he's over at DC. I feel like he's always going to want to play with his toys, right? Like he's always, and so who better, I guess, to combine the two houses.
So let's say this is happening. All right. Yeah. Let's say this is happening. And Tana, you have your pick. You get to choose which book you're working on that features a crossover between DC and Marvel characters. What book's that going to be?
Yeah. Who is it?
So I absolutely have always wanted to do America Chavez, because she is a woman of color who is a lesbian raised by lesbians that punches star-shaped holes in the universe. So that's my wheelhouse right there.
Okay.
And then I also love Poison Ivy. Like, team the two lesbians up, right? Like, give me that. And you could do a dystopian, like, the planet is suffering, right? And everybody's under crisis. And so, of course, Poison Ivy is like, the planet should be allowed to live. And then we'll work in America Chavez punching stuff. I feel like that's the team up of the century for me.
I honestly can say I did not see that coming. So, color me surprised and pleasantly surprised. Hey, any rube can say, I want to see Captain America and Batman, team up, but that's been done to death. Leave it to Tana Ford to give us a unique answer. Fantastic.
I'd read the hell out of that.
Well, so I want to ask you, and you're going to have to correct me on this if I'm mispronouncing your name, because I'm very sensitive to people's pronunciation.
Okay.
But more recently, you had the opportunity to work with, is her name pronounced Nnedi Okorafor?
Yes, it's Nnedi Okorafor. Correct.
Oh, okay.
You did it.
Right out of the
gate. You should have seen him beforehand.
Got it.
So you had an opportunity. You worked with Okorafor on both the Black Panther and LaGuardia.
Yep.
So Nnedi's award credits as an author are numerous, more than I can go into here. She has the World Fantasy Award winner, the Nebula Award for Best Novella, Hugo Award for Best Novella, Macmillan Writers Prize for Africa, and just so many more.
Yep.
So I was wondering, what was it like for you as an artist and a writer coming from the world of comic books, working with someone who has so many accomplishments outside of the world of comics? Was that intimidating at any point, or what was that like for you?
It was wonderful. Working with Nnedi is just a pure delight. She's wonderful to work with. She's extremely creative, extremely productive. She's responsive. Like, there's all of the stuff that I care about in a writer, and in a collaborator, because comics is such a collaboration, right? Like, it's such a back and forth that, you can have the wrong matchup, you can have the wrong team, and it just doesn't work. Yeah. And I felt from the beginning that she and I were on the level, and that we could communicate ideas well. I could translate her vision, to the best of my ability. And it was just a delight to work with her. We got to create a character for the Venomverse crossover event. It was like the big Venom event that Marvel did a couple years ago. It was so fun. And so I got paired up with her, and we got to create a character. So she created a Nigerian girl in a wheelchair who had been a former runner.
Is that
Ngozi, yeah. Yeah,
Ngozi.
and her name means blessing in Nigerian. So that's a little tidbit for you. And when she melds with the Black Panther symbiote, they become Uzaru, this sort of shape-shifting, but mostly grasshopper-like, these back legs. It was important to have legs that worked and were really powerful, but that weren't traditional legs. Nettie is also...
almost.
Yeah, like a locust. Yes.
Yeah.
And so I use that in designing the logo and designing the look of the character. I wanted her hair, the dreads of her hair, to look very like slick and oily. My notes to the colorist were to make this look, as shimmering and like have it look, wet, alive. Like, they're together, but they're both, you have that sort of living suit on you. And that was really great. And so we did a short story inside a larger collection, and it was so well received that they wanted us to do an entire series, like not a series, a single issue.
All right, now I need to ask, how
please.
does that feel? I mean,
amazing.
That they're like, hey, we really, really like this. We want more. I mean, that right there to me, it's got to be one of the biggest compliments ever.
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. And I remember getting the email from my editor, Devin Lewis over at Marvel, who's wonderful to work with. I've met him in person. So much of what we do, I work in my house. And so I live in Florida. So like I'm in the boonies. No, I never see anybody. Yeah. But then I go, to comic book conventions. Remember the before 4 times when we used to do that? And and so I've met all these people in real life. And it's so nice when the people you work with are like genuine, caring, hardworking, wonderful people. And Devin is. And so he connected us. It was during a convention. I got in the email and I was exhausted. I had been on my feet all day. It was, after the show, I'm collapsing. And he's like, hey, how would you feel about doing an entire full issue of that character you created with Nettie? We haven't locked it up yet, but would you be interested? And I was like, yes.
Oh my God, yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh, I would be interested. Keep me in the loop. Oh man. So there have been a couple of moments like that where editors will reach out to you, or, you're having a bad day or something, and that can totally turn it around for you. With Karen Berger, she just cold called me. We had worked together. Nettie and I worked together on Black Panther, and it was wonderful. And she's wonderful to work with. And we had a really good time. And then she got picked up by Dark Horse, by Karen Berger's imprint, Berger Books at Dark Horse. And I think she wanted to work with me. So Karen Berger, who I had never spoken to, just emails me out of the blue. And I was standing in line at a Chipotle, and I was like, oh my God, I have to sit down, because Karen Berger is Karen fucking Berger. Like I'll never forget. It's like, where were you when this moment changed your life? I was standing in line at a Chipotle on my way to a high school soccer game. Like, oh my God, this is amazing. And so, yeah.
Isn't that great? And then like everything afterwards, like once you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this just happened. And like everything afterwards, like you've just had the greatest day, because you're like, all of a sudden you're like, my Chipotle now tastes amazing. And they're like, hey, we're out of salsa. I don't care.
I don't care.
Oh, so it's great. So there are these moments of connection and community in comics that I find can be really transcendent. And that's one of them for me.
So can you tell me about, this wasn't on the list of questions, so I'm going off road, so I apologize.
Let's do it.
Starstruck moment. Can you talk about a moment, kind of your best kind of starstruck moment entering into this magical world of comic book industry?
The very first time that I ever saw Scotty Young in the flesh was a big moment for me. I was just a baby. I had never really gone to comic book conventions. I was going as a fan, I think, or maybe it was early in Boston, and I had like just published Duck, and I was like trying to do the thing. Also, when I published my first book, Duck, I had all these little rubber duckies that I was giving away. So like if you bought a book, you got a little rubber ducky. And after a while I was just like giving them to kids because they had like cowboy hats or, devil ears, or it was adorable. And I was like, I'm a marketing genius. Except then I was like, oh no, these look like they're for kids. And I just did a book about lesbian sex. This was a bad idea.
Look, Tana, you have to learn sometime, okay?
No. I've already got it. I'm the marketing guy. I got it. You walk around and be like, hey, go give this to your mom.
Yes, exactly. I was like, oh man, there was one comic book show where they put me next.
Carrot with a bottle of essential oils or just bubble bath. You're good. You're good.
That's it. Oh my God. Exactly. There. So for me, a starstruck moment was meeting Scotty Young, who I had been a fan of. He had been on some podcasts in Chicago for a long time.
Right.
And I just like, it was really a nice moment. Who else? Ryan Otley, I'm a big fan of, and he's so sweet in real life. And I do this thing where, like, if I meet somebody that I have a deep affection for, I'll do like the word vomit thing where I'm like, I love your work. It's so good. I think that you're the best artist. Da, 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 la, 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 la. Like it just kind of comes out.
She's like us too.
I know. Isn't it crazy?
Yeah. And so those are two of the people. And there are people, there are artists and mostly artists. I think that writers are wonderful, but I think, for me, the thing that blows me away is the art of a book. Yeah. And so I am far more interested in the people that do what I do and, are just at the top of their game. Oh,
and what's awesome about that, and it's something that I love is, when you meet, because there's always that saying, and my dad used to say it all the time, never meet your heroes. Never meet your heroes. But when you actually go and it's a success, you're like, take that, and you're like, great, and that.
Yes.
So obviously, I'm not going to ask specifics. I'm just going to ask a yes or no question because Chris is going to teed me up. He has piqued my curiosity. Okay. I'm not asking you to identify who. I'm not asking for details. I just want a yes or no if you're comfortable answering.
Okay.
Have you had a moment where you met one of your heroes and you were kind of like, oh.
No.
Oh, okay.
Like,
wow, that's amazing. Because
maybe but off the top of my head, I don't have. Okay, there is one, but like he wasn't a hero of mine. He was just like a guy that I like. He's famous in comics, and we might have been on a panel once, and he might have said like super terrible things. But like, okay, I didn't know who you were before, and now I just kind of know who you are now. And so like there have been moments. Awful. Yeah, there are moments like that where I was like, oh, okay, that was a little shitty, but like, all right, you keep doing you, and
that's it.
Now we know what we know.
So I can make you feel a little better, and I won't say any names, but I'll tell you a story.
Thank you, Chris.
Please.
So I was at a con, and I'm looking, and I'm in an artist row, and I'm looking, and I'm all excited of all these people, and I look over in the corner, and here at his prime was one of the like thunder gods of comic book artists. Okay. In a corner.
Yeah.
By himself. Nobody knows who he is. And literally he's sitting there. And I'm like, well, crap. I was like, I know who it is. I'm gonna go. So I go over and I talk to his handler, and he's like, hey, he's selling prints. And if you buy the print, he'll sign it for you. And I'm like, okay, great. So I pick my favorite print and I walk over and I do like, I'm like, oh my God, you drew this, you drew this character. This is my childhood. This is everything to me. Blah, 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 blah. And he looks at me and he goes, and you wonder how I did it, didn't you? And, and he just kind of goes on this, I know, I'm just the most amazing thing ever. I go, whoa, 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 whoa there, partner. And I kind of like look and I was like, yeah, thanks. And he signs the stuff and I walk away. I'm like, nobody knows who you are, but, I came over to show, just a little bit of.
Chris was very upset. He finished an entire tub of Ben and Jerry's that night.
Yeah, it was bad. I was like, I'll show you.
Oh, that's so sad. That's the worst.
It was not.
You're stuck.
Meanwhile, I'm still like, I'm very thankful I met you, though.
You still did really good work.
Yeah, you gotta be gracious.
Sad.
Still.
Tara, I'm curious. So most of the time you make your living being told what to draw. Do you still draw for pleasure? And when you do draw for pleasure, what do you draw?
So I'm working on, great question. I am working on a graphic novel right now that is the final in my Duck series.
She said the thing.
She said my name.
And it's called Duck Third Time is the Charm. And I am doing all of the artistic flexing and the like level up shit that I want to do in comics, but that mainstream like deadline comics don't allow for, right? Like the number one thing you have to do when you're an interior artist for, if it's Valiant Comics or Marvel or anybody, is you need to produce. You are being hired to produce X number of pages in X number of time. And there's never enough time. There just isn't. And, so you have to do what you can do within the framework, produce a large volume of work in a small amount of time. And so you just do the very best that you can and you give it your all, but you don't have that ability to to take your time. And so I'm working on a book right now. Duck Third Time is the Charm is a book about it's about queerness and friendship. It's about Provincetown, Massachusetts, which is a gay place in the world. Do you know Provincetown?
Are you kidding me? Well, we went there for a bachelor party, and my two best friends, we had such a blast.
Tell me.
Is awesome. Great food.
Yes.
Great people. We had a great time. There were drag shows. There were different bars. It was a phenomenal time. We rented a house in Cape Cod and we hung out. It was phenomenal.
And so it's that experience distilled over time. So when I originally had the idea of doing Duck Third Time is the Charm, it's picture this. What is it? Venice, 1920. What does Sophia do from Golden Girls? She's always like, picture this. Yeah. Anyway, you guys might not be Golden Girls. Right? But wherever she's from. Sicily. I think it's Sicily. Yeah, that's right. So picture this. It's Tana, 2015.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm trying to launch my mainstream comic book career. I had some accolades I was trying to build off of, and I had never worked for major publishers yet. So I do the only Kickstarter that I've ever done in my life, and it is to do a full color book of Duck Third Time is the Charm, of my, lesbian friend group having a party weekend in Provincetown, because who better than me to tell that story from the inside out? Right. And it was going to be about queer spaces and what's happening to them, because as gay rights are becoming more mainstream, as the internet and connectivity is more mainstream, like we're losing, what's going to happen to physical spaces is a question that I have, and I wanted to explore it in this book. So I kickstarted in October of 2015. Two things happen. One, before the Kickstarter is funded, I get picked up by Marvel for Silk. I will draw 12 issues of Silk, and then this launches my comic book career. Right. So Duck gets sidelined. But also, so that's October of 2015. By November of 2016, Donald Trump is the president of the United States. And me, like a lot of people in the queer community and that care about things like in the world, go into a deep depression. And suddenly, doing a party book about queer culture in sort of this pink bubble feels tone deaf.
Yeah.
So the project grows over time. Now it is part of the book is talking about this party weekend, but it's like a season of one's life. It's if you ever go to a coastal city, P-Town, like a lot of places, is seasonal, right? Like if you go, to the shore in New Jersey or like wherever, there are places that are seasonal. So in the winter, it's a different thing than it is in the summer, than it is in the autumn. And I'm using that seasonal aspect as an allegory, as a parallel to the seasons of a human life, what we're like in the spring, in the high summer, in the winter. And so I'm playing with all of these themes, and I'm trying to do it. I'm trying to elevate my art to meet what I think a graphic novel can be, and use all of the tools that a graphic novel can use with paneling and structure in a way that like being on a monthly deadline doesn't allow me to do. So I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's quite beautiful. I find it quite fulfilling. And with a global pandemic, I have nothing but time to be drawing and it's an escape for me, right? Because I'm like, remember when we used to go out? Remember when we used to go places and do things with people? Yeah. Remember beaches?
It's so true. It's so true.
For us here, I don't know where it is where you are, but for us, you can't park on the beaches, but you can walk the beaches.
Good.
Our literally said, he goes, I want you out walking, I want you out fishing. He goes, but just stay away from people.
Yes, stay
You
away
know?
from people. Good.
Pretty much what it is.
So where are you? Just so if we could get it. So this is Duck.
Third time is Duck. Third time is the charm.
Is there an anticipated completion date, or is it still even kind of a vague one, or do you have a firm date?
I don't have a firm date. It should be published in 2021. So, the production of the book is underway, and, so I'm looking to have it physically published in 2021. So, yeah. But, oh, man. So,
That's awesome.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, did you?
What's that?
I was going to say, you didn't expect that, did you? There's somebody else who knows what you're talking about.
I did not expect that. I love P-Town. Every time I'm hanging out with Phil Jimenez, who is a wonderful artist in New York, also a gay man, he loves P-Town. And so he and I just end up talking and sort of daydreaming about, like, he's like, I think I'll open a, museum in P-Town. Or like, I was like, let's just go and party together. And like, we do this wistful, oh, do you remember what it was like to be gay? Like,
it was crazy. Like, I remember the end of the night, we found there was this nightclub, and it was down in this basement.
Yes.
And the thing is, it literally looked like a party at someone's house. Yes. And there just happened to be a bar there. And oh my God, man. It was, like I said, it was an absolute blast. Like, it was a great time.
I love it. I love it. So in my coming out, it was so foundational for me as a young queer person. I grew up in an Irish Catholic town, actually in the most Catholic town, in the most Irish Catholic town, in the most Irish Catholic state. So like, Catholicism can fuck with a young queer person. There were no lesbian characters anywhere. Like the gays in the media were, if they appeared in the media, it was because of violence, and there was nothing positive. So like, not only did I not have a language for what I was, or like examples of relationships to look at, but when I did, what I saw was violence. What I saw was hate. Yeah. And so it was a danger to me to be gay. And so the experience of going to Provincetown, to be around people, even strangers, that every restaurant and walking down Commercial Street, on the beach, at the docks, everywhere you go are other queer people like me, masculine presenting women, the whole queer spectrum, all of them. And there was just such a sense of like belonging, and I'm not alone, that I can't explain. Like, it's so profound. I had never experienced that before, and it was transformational for me. Yeah. And so I want to see if I can take pieces of that and put it into a book, to crystallize that.
It seems like that's exactly what you're trying to do with your art and with your storytelling, is to take that same experience of just feeling normalized. Like, it's not just me. There's a whole community out there, and to tell those stories in a way where people can have that same experience of like, oh, okay, there's a world out there for me. And it must make, I can only imagine it must make a huge difference to, like, with someone, not going to do the thing, because I'm trying to be serious with this, when someone that's growing up in one of those towns and picks up a copy of Duck, young person picks it up and is looking at it and is like, hey, there's a world that exists beyond just this small town that I live in.
Yes. And one of the things that I want to show with Duck now, sort of the revamped version of this book, is a life lived over time, that friendships can endure, that queer people can become queer elders, that sense of community. I mean, this is outside of our realm, but the AIDS epidemic took an entire generation of gay men out. Like, there are millions, there's such a gap. And so we don't, in a very real way now in the world, we don't have gay elders. An entire generation of us died in a plague. Mm-hmm. And so, and so I think that the act of aging, of becoming older, of being queer through a lifetime, and how that changes, like a seaside town changes through the seasons, is really important. Also, there's a dog. So anyway, I think it'll be wonderful. Yeah, it's going to be great.
So here's another, again, going off road. Mm-hmm. How would you change comics? I mean, what do comics need? And by that I mean, I mean, feel free to go as far as just from a technical point or from a philosophical point.
Okay.
What does the comic industry need right now that it's not doing, or what could it be doing a better job of doing to keep itself going as an industry of storytelling?
Hmm. I think what I would like to see more than any other thing is for the toxicity of the fandoms of comics to wither and die. I
Oh,
think
okay.
I think
Yeah.
if that one thing were to change, then I think comics blossoms in a way, that like you can't continually poison the ground
Mhm.
and expect things to grow. I think that there are people out there making diverse stories. I think, hire diverse creators, create diverse characters, show more of the tapestry of humanity. Understand as a comic fan that not everything is for you and not everything has to be for you.
Mhm.
You're allowed to like things and not like other things. You don't have to sow the seeds of hatred everywhere and poison the ground that, that comics lives in. So I think if that one thing could change, we would see a foundational change in the industry. I think industry wide, but world peace, right? It's not going to happen.
Well,
Beyond that, just keep hiring people, keep telling diverse stories,
yeah.
be authentic.
Great. Thank you. That's a very, very thoughtful response. Um, so switching now,
Yeah.
when you're not Netflixing Witcher,
Which I love. Oh my God, I thought Henry Cavill did such a good job. Oh, I loved him. I
Like,
never really
honestly, I was the same. Like Superman, okay, but that was his role. That was
oh
his role.
man, I just and you can tell that he loved it, right? Like that Henry was loving it. And I was like, you sweet nerdy boy. I'm into this. Like I'm into, and I loved how Jaskier was such a slut for Geralt, like he's got his little like thing undone, which is, his, what are they called? His doublet is like undone when they're getting the genie and they're fishing. And I'm like, that is such a slutty way to be. Like he's showing Geralt his underwear, right? Like it's like his bras out. Oh, I loved it. So
like the thing with that too, do you know who was the most upset with that entire series?
who?
The Leathersmith, the comic Leathersmith. So Henry Cavill was so big for that he kept rubbing through his leather shirts and everything like
Oh
that.
my God.
Had to keep making them, and like
Oh
I could,
my God.
you could have to look a certain way. And
why do you have to be such a beefcake, sir?
like can't you wear anything that's not form fitting?
Can you have a few, some fewer muscles? I don't know.
Yeah, put on a puffy shirt. God.
Well,
Oh my God.
what else is? Are you Netflixing anything else right now? How are you passing the time?
Yeah, so I'm a Westworld fan, but Westworld is breaking my heart. It is not great, and I don't like saying, like if you love something, be loud about it, right? But if you don't like something, I don't like, I'm not gonna attack something. It's just not.
Mhm.
It's gone in a direction that it's no longer for me, and and I think it's kind of lost its way. But I did find out that Jonathan Nolan is the brother of filmmaker Christopher Nolan. I just discovered
Yes.
that. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Well,
I have
Now-
a small connection to Christopher Nolan. The movie Interstellar.
Yeah.
There's an addendum piece in Wired magazine that I worked on with Sean Murphy and Matt Hollingsworth, which is like more of a backstory of Matt Damon. We're gonna bring him in, Matt Damon's character in the movie.
What did I say?
Yeah. And so, so in my list of collaborations, Christopher Nolan and I are separated. We worked on a thing together. So
Excellent.
technically you were in that movie.
I mean, pretty much I was an integral part of it.
I mean, I'm just saying. That's a technical there.
Well, it's been amazing to me whenever we've had you on, Tana, this bizarre sort of like, you want to talk about connectivity, how you've been sort of simpatico at different moments with Chris, like the whole, like and one of the areas that you've shared has been D&D. You are an avid D&D'er, correct?
I love D&D. I love it. So I miss my home game because I love like crafting and making terrain and painting minis and all that, but we can't play in public or, in private with each other anymore. So
are you guys
I've had to Yeah, so I've started learning Roll20, which is an online tool for playing Dungeons and Dragons, and there's been a learning curve. It's not intuitive, but there's plenty of information online. Yeah, so I'm learning more. I just figured out dynamic lighting yesterday, so my players this week are in for a treat, I hope. But I love it. The collaborative storytelling speaks to me, right? Like you get to create a character. You know, I create stories for a living, but I get to hang out with my friends who, you know, are any of a number of other non-creatives.
Right.
And they get to like express a part of their personality as a, you know, blood hunter warlock or, you know, a celestial cleric or something. Like they get to pick whatever they want to be. And it's fun to see.
Yeah, and it's
I love
always
it.
kind of neat to see where people go and the inspirations that they come. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes you get complete ripoffs, but you get those little like nuances and stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
I did a game not too long ago, and I basically based it around the turn of the century. It was like 1898, something like
Okay.
right around that. So it's still kind of, you still want kind of that steampunk kind of feel and stuff like that. We had our characters, and a buddy of mine comes up with this great idea, and I'm like, okay. And he develops basically an Aladdin character.
Okay.
And so, but instead of having the genie, he is possessed by the genie. So he is the lamp. And
I
therefore,
like it.
During battle sequences, the genie comes out instead of.
I love that.
So it was like stuff like that. Like you come up with these.
Does his head spin around and he spits up and he vomits pea soup too?
No, not that much.
That's a different thing.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
You know, and then all of a sudden they do a song and dance number and whatnot. But it's just it's so intuitive, and that's what I love.
Yep.
Like I said, and I want to say it's mostly our culture. Like this culture is so inventive, and being able to say, okay, well, I like this and I like this, so I can kind of put them together and look what I've created, you know. And I just, and D&D, you have that ability to where you're like, well, I like this character and I like this character. Well, I can kind of throw these together.
You get to play off of each other, right? Like I love the collaborative aspect, and I love the improv aspect of it.
Yeah.
You know, you can really let your personality shine through your characters or explore something, you know, nuanced, and it's just fantastic. Can I steer the conversation in a direction?
Yes.
Steer. You have the con, Mr. Tana.
Yes. So LaGuardia this week, here's some good news. LaGuardia, the creator-owned graphic novel that I did through Dark Horse with Nnedi Okorafor, just became a finalist for this year's Hugo Award, and I am over the moon excited about it. Oh, so the Black Panther stuff that we did in Long Live the King, I did one story, one issue, and they had collected several other issues of the main Black Panther story. And then my story was a part of it, but it wasn't the major story of the Hugo nominated. We almost won. We lost by 8 votes, but Monstrous won, and it was very worthy. So you guys should pick up Monstrous. But this year, a book that I poured my heart and soul into, which is about literal alien immigration.
Right.
So it takes place, LaGuardia Airport in New York is one of the only interstellar airports that allows aliens to like come to Earth and leave Earth and whatever. Technically, it exists in Nnedi's best-selling book series, the Binti universe. In Binti, it takes place in the future, the timeline of Binti. This story takes place at the moment that aliens touch down on Earth, and that, you know, Earthlings are trying to integrate with all of these interstellar, you know, aliens. And what it does, some humans are being xenophobic, some are embracing the possibilities, and what that does to a planet and a culture. And so I think it is a very now kind of book. So I'm very glad that we are finalists, but that was a bright spot. If you guys haven't picked it up, intrepid listeners, you should. You can order it through me directly if you want. I have a few copies, but if you email me or or I don't know, get in touch with me directly. There'll be a link or something, and you mentioned the Just Us Nerds podcast. I will include a limited edition book plate. I only have a few of them, and they're from New York City Comic Con this year from Dark Horse, and so it's a limited edition print. So anyway, if you want the book, and you want to, and you want a special thing from me, let's do it.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. We're honored that you would link our podcast with that.
If you want to do this, maybe you can email us, and then we'll put it up on the Facebook page.
I would love
that way we can. When we do this, we'll have that come up. So maybe we can get a.
I did a thing 2 months ago or something where I sent out the LaGuardia books, and I wrote poems. Not my poetry. I transcribed poetry. I love poetry, and so I do a Billy Collins poem or a Nikki Giovanni poem, or I'd like handpick a poem, and I'd write it out with a little note and send it to somebody that ordered the book from me. So we could bring that back if you guys want a handwritten transcribed poem. I love it.
I love that.
Yeah, so that would be like a special Just Us Nerds kind of thing.
So now we have another connection. So
tell me.
It's just synergy. It's about synergy, baby. It's just we got connections here.
I love this.
So one of the things that as I've been keeping the time, I've been watching every day. Now, mind you, I'm still at work, and my wife and I, it's back and forth. It's the same thing for us. Like our uniforms and scrubs literally go in the wash as soon as we get home. We have to decontaminate what happens. But one of the things that has been keeping me sane and keeping me happy. Have you seen what Patrick Stewart's been doing?
I love him so much.
So Patrick Stewart has been reading Shakespeare sonnets every day.
That's right.
A different sonnet.
That's right.
9 times out of 10, you don't know what they're talking about. You don't know the actual words, but you get the gist.
Oh,
but
he's such a thespian.
I know, but just watching him read and just everything like that, like every day, I'm like, I need to see what Patrick Stewart wrote. He read today, so I make sure that I go on every day, and I find it as like my calm.
Chris changes into his jammies, and he puts on his he puts on his house slippers and puts his nightcap on.
I've got my little tea, and I get there, and I'm like, all right, well, what do we got, Patrick? And make sure, because it's something.
Earl Grey, hot.
Yeah,
make it so.
That's right.
Yes. So that's fantastic. But yeah, I mean,
I love that.
I would love to do that if we.
Yeah, so we'll limit it to, I don't know, I could probably do 10 of them. I don't know. I think I have probably 10 books. If not, I'll put together a something good. But if you guys want a special, in the mail, Just Us Nerds podcast with Tana Ford, exclusive something, let's set it up.
Absolutely, and just make sure that maybe not saying, but if you were to make a donation to the Second Harvest Food Bank GoFundMe, that might up your chances. We can, I'm happy to have you guys organize. They're your listeners, and so if this is a way I can give back, and also gives me an excuse to write out poems I love, or I could do sonnets. I haven't done a lot of Shakespeare. I love Shakespeare, but I don't transcribe him often.
Right. Like I said, there's some things I'm like, I don't know.
Your hair is black and silky. You shoot webs from your fingertips. You seem
little beatnik.
Oh, that's fantastic. That is fantastic.
I have such a good time with you guys.
Tana, it is a genuine pleasure having you on. We really, Chris and I just are so grateful that you were able to take time out of your very busy schedule, being quarantined at home during the COVID-19 pandemic, to be able to speak with us. But it's truly just, you are a joy to talk to, and we really just have a lot of fun whenever you come on.
You guys are great.
It really has been great. Like I said, you're a breath of fresh air. Like when we interview, it's always fun to have you on, and it's always a ray of light.
I can't believe you've been to P-Town. I love that. Oh, I just love it.
Kismet. It's kismet.
Yep.
Like I said, we'll talk, so that way we can talk more about it.
So 2021, this is where
2021.
release date of Duck.
Yeah, that's what we're looking for.
Third time's the charm. Anything else that you want to make people aware of, just as anything you're going to be getting back to work on or doing differently once life gets back to normal?
That's the project that I'm working on mostly. You can follow me on Twitter at Tana Ford. I am infrequently on Instagram at tanaford.designs. And you can follow me on Facebook at tanaford.designs as well. I post updates when there are updates to post. I do a lot of things as an artist. I refinished a table and chairs recently. I was carving, so I got a little box from Michael's Crafts that I carved dice and swirls, and I like hand carved a wooden dice box for my D&D dice. It came out so good. I haven't stained it yet, but I'll send you guys pictures. But like, there's process of me with my little like Dremel tool doing the thing. So for any behind the scenes content, follow me on the social medias, and yeah, I think that's it.
Well, as I said, it's been a pleasure having you on. We're already looking forward to the next time when we have you on again. We'll be letting you know about when this is, because we're taping this, but it's not so it's not live at the time. We'll let you know when it's going to go live so you can see it. This has been Chris and Jay talking with the always entertaining, multi-talented Tana Ford. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, guys.
Take care and stay healthy, okay?
You as well. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Man, what a delight. She is always just I always have a good time whenever we get a chance to interview her. That is so cool. Well, that about wraps up our first segment of the Just Us Nerds podcast panel of power. If you're watching this as part of the 2020 CyberCon Facebook event, make sure that you tune in tomorrow bright and early at 8 a.m. because we will be interviewing comics scribe, legend, and good friend of the show, Mr. J.M. DeMatteis. Until then, stay safe. Be smart. Wash your hands.
Remember, maintain a safe social distance. Stay home when you can. We'll beat this if we stand together, even alone.
Bye-bye and take care.